Thank you. Thank you both.
Receiving disbursements of the first disbursement of the ESD funds, so $2 million of that, as well as the city's $2.5 million, puts us at about $4.5 million by the end of this organizational fiscal year. It contemplates kind of some initial programming that might be rolled out in terms of homeowner direct costs. That if we're able to successfully kind of get programming launched by the end of the year. Within any programming for homeowner direct costs, we are baking in kind of a estimated 10% for program administration salaries and fringe. And so this is kind of pursuant to the discussion that has happened at prior Housing Strategies Governance Committee meetings about what it might look like to enter into an agreement with home headquarters, either kind of on a preliminary basis or on a longer term basis to assist with some of the administration of those costs. The item that Karen had put forward at a prior board meeting, at our May board meeting, assumed kind of a 10% administration, so we wanted to just make sure that that was kind of called out within those costs. I would definitely say that particularly between kind of 25, 26, there is the possibility that kind of some of those dollar amounts within different homeowner programs could fluctuate a little bit from year to year. Obviously, there's a little bit of, it's hard to say exactly what interest rates or interest in programs might be. So if utilization is a little bit higher in one year or the other, there might be a little bit of fluctuation there.
Michelle, I'm sorry to cut you off while you explain. I just got to ask a question real quick. So with the projected budget here, the $2 million from ESD, they're going to give that to us before we spend the 2.5, or as we spend it, and then they're going to reimburse us?
There's 3 tranches. So
Okay.
the first tranche of that upfront is $2 million.
Okay.
That disbursement would occur at the point that they finalize all of their internal processes. So the item was already approved by their board, but there's a couple kind of internal review boards and subsequent administrative steps within their process that have to be finalized before those dollars can be dispersed. What they have communicated to us thus far is that they expect that that should be done around September and that we would have access to that $2 million at that point in time. And then from a spend down period, we expect that those dollars probably, it could be kind of somewhere on the bubble between 26, 27, if we end up moving a little bit faster. But right now, kind of the way that we're bucketing this out is that first disbursement of state funds would kind of largely take up the time between kind of this second half of the year and then through 2026 calendar year.
So the state funds aren't reimbursable after a project's done?
So once we do the first $2 million disbursement, we will need to submit kind of the full accounting of how those dollars were spent before we can access the next disbursement, if that makes sense. So everything has to be spent down. They have to kind of check off all the expenses and then.
But the first $2 million, you're giving it to us to get started?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. But all of the same terms kind of apply that we've discussed previously. None of those dollars can be used for any sort of administrative costs. They do not consider any sort of direct program administration to be an allowable expense. So even if it is kind of a contracted item, professional services related to implementation, that does not count. They will only allow us to use it for direct in the home expenses. So all of this, those dollars will kind of from an actual accounting standpoint and how it's going out the door, any dollars for that sort of programming will need to come from the city's $2.5 million. So I think kind of the main and probably where I should have started just from a headline standpoint, in terms of kind of any other indirect costs of the city's $2.5 million, no more than 10% of that $2.5 million, so $250,000 total, will be used for indirect administration costs within neighborhood and business development or any other city departments. We've broken out kind of just a really rough estimate of what we think could be what we need to be spending between the end of this calendar year and then the upcoming calendar year to get to that $250,000. But it's my understanding from conversations with the clerk that the way that the ordinance will be written, really kind of the main stipulations that are going to be in place are that we don't go over $250,000 and that there is no dollars that are used for any creation of any positions. So
Is it seem realistic to you that we won't have any staff costs in 2025?
So I think that that's where kind of from a budgeting standpoint, understanding that the Housing Strategies Corporation's fiscal year is calendar year based versus the city's fiscal year base is opposite cycle. So starting July 1, I think from a draw standpoint, I think we could draw a lot of those costs within the second half of the calendar year if we needed to. But I think that's really just kind of an accounting question. And I think from my understanding, again, as I noted, I think the biggest thing is that from a timing standpoint, it's less so about the exact timing when some of that draw might occur and more that we do not exceed $250,000 in total expenses with that $2.5 million.
Oh, no, I get that part. I just was perplexed that we're not going to spend anything on staff for 6 months, but it sounds like that's not necessarily the case.
I mean, I think all of these are positions that exist within the current city budget. So I think from a offset standpoint, we can make it work for a period of about 6 months. I think that's kind of how we were trying to balance some of it out. I think also, though, open to feedback if people have other preferences for how we would set that up.
No, thank you for the free assistance. Keep doing it, please.
Michelle, can you just speak to the, I see we have some neighbors here, and I think we're all anxious to actually start doing work in the neighborhoods. I see the Block Challenge Program, $7,188 expenditure in the current fiscal year, so between now and January 1. Everything else is pushed out into 2026. Is this a scenario similar to what you laid out for staff, where we may be spending more programming dollars before January 1, or are we really pushing all of that out?
No, I think that there's a very likely scenario, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the programmatic terms. I think there's a likely scenario in which we would be spending a little bit more, particularly for that program, by the end of 2025. So a little bit of kind of fluctuation there. Again, this is kind of a projected based on information that we have before us today, kind of arising out of the what we were looking to get forward from the council.
So just to be clear, is there anything prohibiting us from shifting more of these costs into 2025?
No.
Okay. Based on Caitlin's question and my question, it would seem, understanding, we still have work to do to stand everything up. I think, the more accurate we can be, the better. And I think given all of our desire to see work happen, it would make sense to me anyways, happy to hear from others on the board, to try to put more of those costs in 2025.
Okay.
Anybody have strong feelings one way or the other about it?
No, I mean, I just want to say I understand that this is a work in progress at this early stage of the organization's life, and it's not a problem if we need to come back and amend this several times over the course of the year. That's part of the learning curve.
Maybe it's a little
Yeah.
premature, but if we're going through the exercise of adopting it, I'd be inclined to have it be more reflective. But again, if there's just too much uncertainty now and we want to adopt what we have in front of us and then reserve the right to come back, I'm fine with that too.
I agree with you that it makes sense to shift to show that we have an intention of advertising the program and getting it up and running, and we're not trying to drag our feet,
Would people be amenable to simply kind of splitting, at least between the Block Challenge program and the staffing, that we just kind of split those 50-50 across the 2 years? Or are there?
It couldn't hurt. It's a starting point anyway, and then we can always adjust it later if we need to.
I agree.
So what you have in 26 will be split, that total will be split between 25 and 26?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we're saying is that monies would be spent, reimburse the NBD as far as administrative goes? Is that what you're saying, Michelle?
So these costs will offset a portion of those existing positions. So the positions that are listed there, Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood Development, that's my position. Housing Initiatives Project Manager, that's Hannah's position. Portion of Camon's position, and then a very small portion of a data and mapping analyst and a planner. would be offset. And so those would be costs, I think, within each of those positions. There were adjustments that were made to our CDBG administrative budget this year from the council that kind of reduced the overall amount that we had within administration. So these costs can kind of help close some of that gap that otherwise we didn't have a source for some of those salary lines.
And just to further complicate things, I think for me personally, and to Caitlin's point, to the extent that the cities and NBD are willing and able to cover costs for the remainder of the calendar year, I certainly don't have any issue with that. I think what I'm more focused on is if we're able to put more money out into the neighborhoods sooner, I'd rather be more aggressive in budgeting, in adjusting that budget.
Gotcha. So leave staff the same and adjust the block challenge program line?
That would be my proposal.
I
think it's the construction season this year.
I think that makes
completely.
sense. Yeah. And I should know this, but I guess I've never really paid that much attention. With other authorities like SIDA and SEDCO, do those agencies turn around and pay the city for some of the staff time? No?
I believe so.
Okay. I'm just wondering if there's another model we can kind of mimic so we're not reinventing the wheel.
Mike says yes. For staffing? Forgive me,
Okay.
that, right.
Is there some sort of professional services agreement in place that governs the terms of that transaction? You don't have to answer today, you can find out later. I'm just curious if there's an existing template that we can copy so we don't have to start from scratch.
From asking that question previously, I don't think that there is, but we
Okay.
have raised it with outside counsel. So,
Okay.
and I do think that that's likely something that we would want to look to try to get in place, kind of in light of what we're working with here. So,
Okay.
But because, right, I mean, just looking around, a lot of folks here have already been, I mean, before we pass this legislation for the money, they've already been immersed in this program anyways. And who's been covering them? I mean, this is like we're acting like they're new. I mean, it's great because everybody knows where we're going, where we have to end up. But I don't really understand why we have to adjust the costs as far. I agree with the mayor. I said the more money we can put into the actual housing.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate that, Counselor. And I think, especially early on, I mean, clearly this work is aligned with the priorities and the mission of the Department of Neighborhood and Business Development, which is, I think, why you're seeing so much staff resources being put into it. I think it's fair to say that once programs are fully operational, understanding we may have some additional support through, contracted partners, it will be, that burden will go above and beyond what's current, what our current staff capacity is. But again, I think early on, especially given some of the concerns about staffing and where the costs are going, I think, we focus now on getting money out the door into the neighborhoods and then be in a position at the beginning of the fiscal year to really have a clearer sense of what's going to be required on behalf of city staff.
And I realize that, of course, as we get into it, the work's going to
That's
become
it.
more intense.
Right.
And they're going to be moved away from their regular
Right,
duties, too.
but we're not
so-
there yet. Yeah. Okay.
And one more question about the staffing numbers. This is inclusive of all fringe costs as well? Okay.
So Michelle, based on that, what number would you feel comfortable, what amount would you feel comfortable shifting under homeowner programs? Is it just under the challenge program? Would we want to try to?
I think realistically, in terms of kind of, as we have discussed recently within governance committee meetings, I think there's still some more variables that we need to flesh out with the larger homeowner renovation programs in terms of exact minutia of some of the qualifying logistics. Are we going to require this, that, or the other? And so from a timing standpoint, I think our ability to move that before the end of the year, I think it would be realistically pretty tight. I also think that that's probably the area where we feel that we need to do the most additional, once we have kind of a preliminary set of programmatic terms for those programs that the board feels comfortable with. I think that's where we want to do a little bit more kind of final socialization with residents about those to make sure that those terms kind of generally would make sense if there's any kind of last minute things that we need to take into account before we fully roll that out. And I think just realistically kind of understanding that we're coming up on the beginning of July already, that's going to be tight. So kind of thinking starting that towards the beginning of the year. Obviously, I think we do really want to try to move on the block challenge program as much as possible before the end of the year. Make sure that we're not missing the weather window, just in an effort to kind of make sure that we're maintaining momentum for the work, so.
Would you be open to shifting all of the block challenge program?
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything wrong with us doing that, no.
All right, so we shift the 28,753 into 2025 on top of this 7,188. We leave the other more extensive programs in 2026.
Michelle, the Block Challenge program is going to be, can you just explain that just a little bit? We got some people here today.
Yeah, yep, so there's information that is also included within your packets, and this can all be found online in the packet that's on the meeting notes for anyone who's watching at home and wants to take a look at it. So these are the draft programmatic terms as of last week, based on what the board has kind of contemplated to date. So the idea with this particular program is that it's kind of small matching grants up to $2,500 per property. It's really designed to be kind of promoting some quick beautification work in the neighborhood, promoting neighbors working together to do kind of some quick curb appeal updates to their properties. So really kind of collaboration, capacity building, and placemaking. So these are not meant to be kind of the transformational major home renovation programs. That stuff is all still coming. And as I mentioned, there's still a little bit more that we need to flesh out kind of from the terms there. But idea is kind of exterior upgrades, mailboxes, shutters, painting, lighting, landscaping, those types of improvements that people might want to do. The idea would be that it could be eligible for both the owner occupants as well as rental properties if the rental property owner or the rental property occupant has the permission of the owner of record for the project that they're doing at their particular property. There's some additional kind of terms, as I mentioned, that are included within the packet that I'm happy to speak to. And
So it's matching, so they have to have $2,500 in order to do it, and then we match it. And they have to be 5 or more people. Is it together? Is it separate? Is it in a row?
so I think the way that this is kind of broken out here right now, and again, this is all, as I mentioned, kind of what the board has contemplated to date. And I think that what we wanted to kind of cover in the, as far as eligibility in general, as it pertains to items that were on the agenda.
Well, I would like to know this, because people are here, so they asked me, so I think this is important, because this is gonna roll out like ASAP. So while they're here, we need to.
And I'm happy to keep speaking to it just from a matter of board items from a budget standpoint and where we're at on the agenda.
Well, I don't know the answer, Michelle, so I would like to know. So could you just tell me the answer, please?
We haven't decided yet, is the answer. The
So you
governor,
don't-
So what it says
Well,
right
then that
now
needs to
in
be
the
said.
packet that is in draft form that was discussed at the most recent governance committee meeting is that a team of 5 or more would be up to $1,000 as a matching grant. From a sight line, each team would need to be able to see the other person's property. So it could be kind of from a diagonal across the street, it could be kind of a backyard neighbor, but the idea is that you could have some line of sight into the adjoining properties. Teams of up to, if it's a team of 6 people or more, then that would be where you would enter into the up to $2,500. Again, these are all draft terms. They can be subject to what the board would like to discuss further. Understanding that this was discussed kind of at committee once already. I know there was a couple things that we had that we went back and forth on, and that are, you can reference them in the minutes, which are also in your packet. I think that to the extent that there are extensive changes that the board would like to see further contemplated to this program, then I might recommend that we kind of hold some of that discussion for subsequent committee discussion, but.
No, that's fine, and I'm not on the governance committee, so I did not know about all these rules. I'm just getting them, and people are here, so they asked me just a few minutes ago. So while they're here, I think it's good. And my other real reason why I was asking that is because I think we should put more money in there. The $28,000 really isn't a lot of money for this, and I would be willing to move a little bit more money over to that part of it, because it's not a lot of money, especially if you do $2,500 and 28,000, you're only gonna get a few houses. So, I mean, I think it would be a good start to put a little bit more money in that, if we could.
Sure. And I think we can certainly look to do that. I think where some of the projections came from there, they're actually kind of bumped up quite a bit from the initial recommendations that we got from CZB even, and a lot of that was based on what they were actually seeing as kind of moved expenses for some of the work that they were doing out in Des Moines. I think on average, they were seeing that people were typically putting in about $500 per house. So matching that. So even though you can go up to 1,000 on average, the kind of per participant wasn't actually spending quite that much. Certainly don't have an issue with putting more in it. And if it turns out that we end up spending less, that's totally fine too. I think the one thing we would just kind of want to try to be mindful of globally is the kind of overall understanding what we're long-term trying to do, kind of in service of improving overall property values within the neighborhood, just kind of thinking about overall distribution of what some of the larger projects are versus the smaller ones, so.
Yeah, what I'm most excited to get out the door are the bigger grants and loans so that people can do, more significant rehabs to their homes.
All of it's great. I just want to make sure, we got July, August, September, October. We got a couple more months where I just did some work on the outside of my house, and I know $2,500 will go with a snap of fingers.
Sure,
right?
yeah, yep.
So I was just trying to maximize it. If we can always move the money back over. But if we have it their allotment, and if they apply for it and they want to get painted or they want to do that,
Yep.
let's try to utilize the best
Yeah.
weather time. That's all.
Yeah,
I'm
and
saying.
I mean, to that end, kind of that, and that's why I kind of bring up, to the extent that there's other changes that people want to see contemplated, that's, I think, the balance we have to strike here of, are we prioritizing, we want to continue to talk through all of the specifics of all aspects of this, or is the board sufficiently comfortable with us moving forward, kind of in service of being able to get something out the door for this fall? Because the weather window is definitely a reality. And I'm not trying to advocate one way or the other, but just from a matter of timing and logistics, I think that that's just the consideration.
What if someone doesn't have $500 to match it? Are we having some kind of, we can come up with a plan?
Yep, and so that was kind of what was
talked about that,
contemplated within what home headquarters had presented, which I have a copy of, happy to pass out for folks.
When you say moving more money into that program, do you mean that you would want to increase the cap higher than 2,500, or that you would want to do more $2,500 projects?
More $2,500
Okay.
projects. Not increasing, but more $2,500 projects, because $28,000
It's not a lot, yeah.
at all. And if we had to move, maneuver some other things that we know is not gonna be addressed in 2026, then, we probably could, and at that time, we might get ESD money, which can help, but it would be nice, if people had the availability and they can get a contractor, they can do some of the work, we could get started if it fits under the parameters, now, that's all.
And this is, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Can the block group be a mix of owner occupants and tenants?
Yes, yeah, yep, that was what I had mentioned previously.
didn't
So I
see
think
that,
in the event that we had a person that was a member of a team that was a tenant, we would look to see that they had the permission from the owner of record of the property, that that homeowner had consented to whatever the scope of work of their specific element of their project is, that they're all good with that. And then we would also look to see that that person had at least submitted an application for the rental registry. We're not going to say that you need to fully have everything completed, but you need to kind of at least take that first step, so.
So I'm going to go a little off script here. Since we do have neighbors here, anyone want to weigh in with strong feelings very briefly? Lisa, come on up. If you could just come up to the podium and introduce yourself.
Lisa Hart, I live at 169 Edgell, Salt Springs. So we have a couple of questions. Are you absolutely adamant that it has to be a minimum of 5?
I'm not.
We were saying, like, could it be 3 neighbors? We're concerned about 5. Like on my street's smaller. So like me trying to get 5 neighbors, I don't even see 5 neighbors. Like from, you know what I mean? Would be able to do 3. And then the other thing, it's not clear. Are you saying if we have to do 5 or even 3, we all have to do the same thing? Or can I do a front door and you do a sidewalk and you do shutters and you do landscaping? So as long as those people agree, and we all have the cost share of like we all need to put in the 500. And do we come up with the cost share ahead of time? We have to give that to the city ahead of time? Or do we pay the contractor? Like, how does that work? It's not clear in the paperwork.
Yeah, so in terms of kind of the scoping, so each member of a team could pursue whatever specific projects they wanted. It doesn't even need to necessarily, say you have 3 members of a team, not all 3 members have to spend $500. Someone could spend $500, someone could spend more, 500, 600, 700 for the sake of easy math. And then each of those would be considered kind of a matching component. The biggest thing is that we want to kind of try to prioritize getting some of that density and being able to kind of see some concentrated impact of improvement. So,
But each individual project is just that. It's individual, separate, and distinct. So you're not pooling resources or anything. You're just simply saying, to Michelle's point, we have 5 or 3 neighbors that are bought into this and are going to participate. And then we know that by making the investment in that particular area, that we're going to see more than just one improvement on one property.
yeah.
So, come on, speak up here, come up here.
Can you just clarify the funds, like for matching, for the cost share? Do I give that cost share to you? Do I pay the contractor and give you receipts? Like, it's unclear in the paperwork how that works.
Yeah, so, and I think that is also kind of something in terms of outstanding things for the board to fully finalize exactly how we wanted to do that. I think the kind of model that we were working off of was contemplating that the homeowners would be spending those costs up front and then they would be submitting them for reimbursement. But that is not necessarily, that does not mean that is what the board has to ultimately decide is the programmatic term. I think it goes back to kind of a question that, again, we had during the governance committee meeting, which is how do we find that balance of making sure that projects are fully completed? This specific program, I think as it is conceived at this point in time, would not have any amount of like a lien that's going on the property at all. It's meant to be kind of small projects, small dollar amounts. That is not going to be kind of a good use of resources really to ensure that projects get done. But to the extent that people feel like from a fiduciary responsibility that we need to have some mechanism to make sure that the work is actually completed and understanding the smaller dollar amounts, I think that's what we have that we're putting forward. But to the extent that people have different feelings or would like to advocate that it be done in a different manner.
I definitely agree with Lisa. Come on. I don't think we should just noting neighbors, it just puts people sometimes at a situation. If this neighbor said no, that neighbor said, but we need it. And, I just think 5 is too much. 3 is probably much better than 5 as far as getting neighbors to agree. But go ahead.
Mine is more of a comment. So I had read through briefly sort of the draft application process, and it just, to me, seemed so overly complicated that you're not going to have success. And so one thing that jumped out at me right away, so there was, and in listening to the minutes of the governance meeting, people got up and they started talking about, we need to have people go for financial counseling. And so one person said, we should have 3 sessions with this specific program in the city. And then it was reduced to 1. So, of course, I go and I look up this program. And it says right away, first of all, it's like financial counseling for people who are struggling with their finances, of which most, and also it said, we're not taking anybody right now. So it was a program that's already overextended or they don't have the staff for it. So right there, you're like, okay. And then there were other things that when it was talking about mortgages and liens and things like that, I was like, okay, forget it. No, I'm not, it was just too much work.
Yeah, and I think probably if it was not necessarily clear within the scope of the minutes of the meeting, I think that the conversation that was happening during that discussion was very much, I think we're talking a lot about this particular program at hand, but also kind of terms that might need to come into place once we get to some of the larger programming where we have larger dollar amounts. Okay. I think what you're referencing, there was some discussion about our ability to allow funds to go to a property that might be behind on their taxes. And so that was where kind of participation, I think there was discussion about whether or not as a provision of would we consider basically accepting an application from someone who was behind on their taxes? And if so, under what circumstance? That circumstance was if they completed a session with a financial empowerment counselor through the FEC. Understanding kind of appointment availability is definitely a relevant kind of factor there. I think what we were kind of trying to do was like find that balance. I think typically within a lot of different city programs or even kind of like applications, licenses that you might go through, oftentimes being current on your property taxes is a provision of being either kind of being eligible for those
Should be,
programs.
yeah.
Right.
Right.
I think the argument for why that can sometimes maybe be counterintuitive for a program of this nature is sort of understanding that any improvements that a homeowner is making to their property do have an impact on the surrounding homes in any case. And so I think the discussion was really, can we find kind of a middle ground there? So.
And one other thing that, again, just kind of set me off a little was there was a whole discussion about making sure people had estate planning in place, and just that this is where you're taking those funds and you're just you're spending them on things that's not what this program is meant for. So anyway, that was
Understood.
my comment.
Yeah.
So I think
Appreciate
they need
that.
to really think through
Yeah.
the application process and make it as I won't say easy, but easy to navigate as well as
Yeah.
best.
Yeah, and so just appreciate that feedback. A couple points. One, I say it almost daily in this building. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Again, Karen and her team have done many of these programs. May end up doing this one, and I think, to your point, the simpler the better. I think again, the context for the discussion around estate planning is what we often run into in neighborhoods is homes that have been in a family for a long period of time, and you might have a parent who's deceased and the child has just continued to maintain the property, pay the taxes, but isn't technically the owner because they never effectively handled the estate planning part of it. So that's just something that we encounter regularly, but in no way is intended to be a barrier to participation.
Excuse me, Mayor, would anybody be against, I know we have the governance committee, but is there anybody on the community, like we're gonna create an advisory committee, right? Is there anybody like on the community that could be a part of the governance committee that could help us come up with some of these, since it's gonna affect them, like, some of what we're gonna talk about, because those are some of the feedback could have been like, oh yeah, like I think Lisa wants.
I think where we had, that was kind of the idea with the creation of the resident advisory committee component of this. I know that we have had some discussions and some back and forth with our law department about implications that participation on that committee might have for homeowners to their ability to participate in programming themselves. And so I think that was something that, Mayor, I'm not sure if you made any further progress on getting a firm determination on that, but.
Ongoing discussion with Corporation Counsel, but yeah, I think so. Yes, the advisory committee is the mechanism for getting that feedback. I think per the bylaws, the governance committee is made up of who it's made up of. But to your point, Counselor, the governance committee shouldn't be making up rules without consulting with the neighborhood first.
And I
don't
think
have
the
the
reason,
advisory committee all done
correct,
yet,
and the
right?
reason that we don't have any of them done yet, and the reason for that is because we're trying to get very firm final determinations on, is participation on that committee going to be a disqualifier from your ability to access funds yourself? What the law department has told us thus far is that it is. That is not currently how comparable, or I would say comparable, things that we've got between like the Land Bank Advisory Board is set up right now. Wherever the final answer is, we just need to make sure that people know firmly one way or the other before we put them on it, because the last thing we want is to have somebody who is living in the neighborhood, really would like to be able to access programming themselves, be kind of hamstrung from doing so because they agreed to participate on that committee, so.
Okay, go ahead.
Michael.
Yes, hi. Michael Messina Yancey, 435 East Genesee Parkway. So the steering committee for Salt Springs has been meeting since last fall. And of course, we still have some questions. And I think a lot of us are unclear about how far exactly the funding will go, how many people can be served. And one of the things we've spent a lot of time on is where the money should be targeted to have the greatest impact on the view of the neighborhood, the image of the neighborhood, its beauty, attractiveness, and so on. So personally, I would love to get some help with painting our house. It's definitely needed, but I don't know that it's going to come particularly to my street. I think having a string of 5 or 6 houses that are really improved and look good would be great, but 3 might be more doable. I think about my street and getting 5 people together. I don't know, 6. I don't know. Pretty sure I could get 3. But in any case, so I'm not assuming that, I'm going to get help with my house. It would be great. But I think, again, we want to keep in mind where it's going to have the greatest impact for the neighborhood.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.
Okay. So in the interest of moving us along, Counselor, you had suggested putting more money into the block challenge, understanding that if we don't go through it, we can shift it. Is there a number that you have in mind?
I mean, just clarifying, this is 2,500 that they can go max, right? And it doesn't pay back, it's theirs. So how many, that gives you what, 10 or 11 houses if they use the max, right? Just say, so I think we should at least go up to another, we should move that. Maybe we just take the whole 27 too and just move it over. And if we don't utilize it, we can always move it back. But I just think that if we can get some of the things done this summer, like those small, there are win-wins for neighborhoods,
Take this
Absolutely.
one out here and shift it over?
All of it, just move it all over.
Plus 37,
Yeah.
okay.
And then if we need to, by then 27, we'll have a better understanding of what we can't do, what we should do, what's working, what's not. But $2,500, and if people can maximize and get work done, I think it should all be shifted.
Yeah, I think it's fine if we want to all shift it. The other thing I would offer is that to the extent, so where these numbers came from is kind of based on per project average costs for the first 2 wave neighborhoods. There's also the possibility, just based on kind of projected amount of dollars that we're going to have in the bank for 2025, I don't see a reason why we couldn't also just consider matching it and keeping both years at 28, if that made sense to people
28
also.
and 37, just move it over?
So bump up 2025 to 28.7,
Yeah, 20,
and then
yeah.
keep the other 2 as currently is for the block program. Does that?
You may very well not even spend it.
Yeah, but
Correct,
at least
yeah.
have it available.
It's going to
Yep.
take a while to get
Yeah,
out the door.
I just say move it over, because if it's, say you get 30 applications and they do get 4 people in a row and they got great idea, they got the money to go, and they got contractors or they could do the work, I would love to see it moving forward instead of us coming back and say, well, we don't have the money in there, when if it's a quick, good win,
Right.
we might as well go ahead and do it.
Yep. Okay. So do we want to match the dollars 20, 25, 26, 27, or just move over 2026 to 2025?
I say move 2026 over and 2027, and then if you don't, you just move it back. It's like,
just shift it
it's
all
just
over to
available.
2025,
So
and
it's
then it goes
available, and if you don't utilize it, then it just goes over. But if people come and you get, which I think you're gonna get a list of people coming, I think it just would be a better, opportunity for more work to get done.
So we'd be looking at just over 73,000 in the BCP line for 2025.
Yep. If you guys are okay with that,
Yep. Sure.
And you're right, if it doesn't get spent, it'll just roll over.
it just rolls over.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Have you had any further conversations with Brown & Brown about our insurance needs?
We have asked for an updated quote.
Because I see that you have D&O insurance here, but aren't we going to need general liability as well?
I think that was all included within what they had quoted us for.
Oh, a hell of a deal.
Oh, Hannah,
Yeah,
I stand
they
corrected.
gave us a quote for D&O specifically, but they said the next step would be talking about general liability.
Okay.
So we can ask them for both quotes.
If they're, to the extent that you think that maybe needs to get bumped up proactively based on your comparable costs, I think I was kind of taking a stab based on what I was seeing from some of the other municipal corporations.
Yeah,
I
I
did
don't-
notice that land banks was quite a bit higher, but
Ours is a premium based on how much physical work we do at various properties, and because this organization isn't going to be hiring the contractors and doing the work, I'm not sure that we're going to have any exposure there. So that would be something I'd really be eager to discuss with Chris and figure out what our exposure really looks like. But don't use us as an example, is my point.
Yeah, that was why I
Yeah.
was skewing closer towards our premium costs in Sedco. But
When the quote comes in, we can always do a budget amendment then to match it.
Good afternoon. Quick question. George Lynch, East Side Planner with MBD. So I'm just considering, I'm sitting here and thinking, have you guys considered for the acquisition of the funds, once that community member receives the funds, is there a timeline on when they have to potentially have that work done, with the idea that contractors always aren't readily available and can be pretty busy? I understand the industry. And then also, like, are these contractors going to be required to, like, come from a certain pool? You know, you talked about insurance, also like their certificates, things of that nature, depending on the capacity of the work they're doing. Is that being considered, like, in regards to the acquisition of the funds, when the work needs to be done, and then where the contractor is being, like, received from? And then also we'll probably need codes to verify and vet the work that's being done by those contractors. And I asked that question because I've seen a couple of times now where people have actually been scammed by contractors, especially on the east side. I actually met with the Westcott Community Center president, and she explained to me that it was a big thing amongst elderly people being scammed by contractors. So just hoping that we can consider those things as we roll this out. That way the city's funds can be used in the best way possible.
Thank you, George.
So as the terms are kind of currently existing in their draft form, again, subject to the board choosing to make some different parameters, what this contemplates is that work would need to be completed 90 days from the point that the application is approved. I think the scope of work specifically for the block challenge program terms, understanding that it's a lot of smaller scale aesthetic type work, mailboxes, some lighter painting, landscaping. While there certainly could be some contractors that could be in the mix there, that we would maybe need to look to negotiate some sort of extension for a particular applicant, which I think we would be more than willing to do if needed beyond that 90-day period. I think the thinking is that given the scope of the program, a lot of it is going to be things that are likely done through some sort of kind of homeowner sweat equity or kind of smaller scale contractors. I don't know that there's a ton of different types of work that's kind of contemplated within this that for that dollar amount that you would be doing where you're really triggering requirements where it requires a licensed contractor to be doing it. I think, so I guess the short answer for that is that I think in the event that someone presented us with a situation where, say they're older, they do have a contractor that's coming, if you can substantiate proof that you have that, we can make an extension if needed. Obviously, weather is an applicable factor there, so if it's something where, like, landscaper says we can't come do this until the next year, you know, we'll have to work with that, but that's a pretty solvable problem, I would think. Certainly as far as kind of some of the, once we get into larger programming, the needs around the contractors, will obviously need to be requiring that someone have a licensed contractor to the extent that the scope of work requires that work to be done by a licensed contractor. And again, I think we would be working kind of in conjunction with partners to make sure that we have all of those things kind of buttoned up and addressed appropriately.
Okay. I'm going to keep us moving now. Thank you for the input from folks in the audience. So what I am hearing is we're going to shift all of the BCP funds currently in the budget allocated in 25, 26, 27. We're going to shift all of that to 25, which, if my math was correct, and I know you were doing it as well, Caitlin, 73,694. And then obviously that will affect the other year budgets. Other than that, any other questions, comments, concerns, suggestions about the budget? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to authorize the budget, understanding that, you know, things very well may change and we can circle back and amend as needed.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Good discussion, Counselor. Thank you for your feedback on that, as well as others. Thank you to the neighbors. Good news is, for other business, is reviewing the Draft Neighborhood Block Challenge program terms. We covered quite a bit of that. So Michelle, anything else you want to share on that or the other items, the 10-year activity update map and the housing strategy areas programming and launch timeline?
Yeah, I guess I think my main question at this point with regards to the Block Challenge program is in their form as they are within the packet is that I think ultimately we're getting towards a point where we need the board to make a determination. Are you comfortable with the terms as they stand or are changes needed? If so, what changes are those that need to be made? So.
There's a couple of changes that I would like to suggest as far as preferred projects. I would love to see driveways added to it. It could even be as simple as they need to get the, what is that? Ceiling, right, to their driveways. I know it said front windows, but if a person is doing a project and they change a front window, but a back window is broke, I wouldn't want us to not give them, you know what I mean, not approve of it, because that is just as important, right? People, I can see my neighbor's backyard, right? So that would be a suggestion. The other suggestion on this would be, as far as the 3 to 5, I think 5 is a little too much. I think there should be an option of at least 3, you know, and we look at it case by case. You know, we don't want to turn anybody away because everyone's financial situation is different, right? So we don't want to cause any tension. So I think we should look at that. Those are the ones I see, like, as of looking at it right now.
Can I ask a question? If we're contemplating dropping down to 3 as opposed to 5, would the thought be that you would also drop down the maximum dollar matching amount? Commensurate with that? So say that I think for 5 people as this currently stands, it would be up to $1,000 for a team of 5 or more, up to $2,500 if you have more than 5 people participating on a team. Would we contemplate that we would only go up to, say, $500 if we only have 3 people participating?
I don't think it should be that way. I don't think it should. The only reason I have an issue with that, like, I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to cluster, but you're just like putting people up against each other, and that's the last thing we want to do in this community. If I can't get 5, that means I can't get 2,500, but I might have 25. You might have 20, but another one might not have it, so it messes up. So we're like putting neighbors against each other based on financial, and we do not need that. What I think it should just be is who can, you know, who's doing what. I don't think it should be based on their application.
But the 25 is a maximum, not a minimum. So if
Right.
2 of you have 2,500 for the match and the other one only has 1,000 for the match, that would be fine.
Right, but what if I don't have 5 people?
Right.
Well, then, yeah, we drop that to 3.
Right, so then you're causing tension with neighbors. We don't want that. We want them to come together and beautify and love, and it shouldn't be, and everyone, we know everybody's financial state is different. We got working families, we got seniors, we got all kinds of, in the neighborhood. So I just think it shouldn't be that way. I think it should be based on the application. We want to encourage, you know, because the neighborhoods are coming together. We want to encourage it, but we don't want this to be to deter why they can't get what they want because, or what they could afford based on somebody else. I just don't think that's fair.
Change this to just have 1 tier,
Yeah,
3 or
just-
more, 2,500.
Yeah, and I think it should go by there, you know? Just, you know, everybody's financial state is different. You don't want that.
You're going to get a bigger impact that way.
But
I think it's a good suggestion. You get
Yeah.
a bigger impact that way. I understand we want to get this rolled out as soon as possible, but at this point, we don't know if it's being administered in-house or if it's going to be subbed out to home headquarters. I think we need some more planning on that. Ideally, I'd love at the next meeting if we could have a service agreement between the corporation and home headquarters so that we could approve those terms and you could start advertising.
Yeah, I think Home Headquarters has put together kind of a brief scope of what some of that looks like. I think, Karen, something that would be helpful is to get kind of a breakout of budget and kind of specific positions that would be in there, kind of following the template that you all would normally submit for like CDBG or something like that. In terms of kind of specific staff positions that will be included and, yeah, all that good stuff.
So Michelle, Councilor Caldwell's made a few recommendations, which it sounds like we don't have any issue with. Is it your expectation that the governance committee still reviews and finalizes this, or are you hoping that this takes care of it?
I think it's a question for the board of if we have a majority of people here and people feel sufficiently comfortable moving it. Again, it goes back to the question of, are we prioritizing timing of getting things moving here? If there's further consideration that would like to be had, then that's fine. It just might, the longer that we spend kind of going through some of the specifics,
So I think we're all anxious to get going. We don't want to be reckless about it, but we don't want to waste time either. So I think, ideally, we would be, are you looking for us to take formal action, a vote on this to finalize it, Michelle?
I would think, yeah, if the next request is that we want to see a service agreement in place with home headquarters, I think we would want to at least try to have these terms
Okay.
finalized.
So, I mean, we can wait, or we could do it now. We could, do you expect a governance committee review of term sheet from Karen?
There was one, I think, that was technically on the books as a hold. I do know that there's a few folks that aren't going to be able to make it, and I think ultimately the planned time for those meetings is meant to be kind of every 2 weeks from now, basically. So if we needed to use the time for any overflow tomorrow, we could, but I do know that there's some folks that were not able to attend, so.
Probably better to have some time to prep anyway.
Yeah, so otherwise, 2 weeks from now, we have a governance committee. We could adopt this, we could review if there are any additional changes at the governance committee, we could come back at the next board meeting, make any necessary adjustments to the program, and also authorize an agreement with home headquarters.
Could we, just another suggestion, is there any way that we can, there's not a lot of changes need to be made, right? Moving over money to tweaking a couple of added things on and changing that. Can we change that and do a special board meeting where we just vote on it so we can get stuff moving? Like, is that okay? Like,
I was suggesting that we
vote on this now?
Yeah, you can make
Okay.
the motion with the changes that you recommended. That'll be reflected in the resolution, and then we can just vote on it. That makes sense, Michelle?
So would home headquarters be putting together the application forms that the homeowners fill out, or would the city staff be doing that?
I think we need to kind of talk through that piece of it a little bit more. I think we're open to whatever makes the most sense kind of for all parties, understanding capacity, timing, all that good stuff.
And would city staff be doing the outreach to the homeowners to let them know that the program is live?
Yes, yeah.
You would be doing all the front facing.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there a map of where these, okay.
Yeah, we do have a map that I can send out. And I think for this program in particular, the Block Challenge programs, we would be looking to open it up to the full areas in the clusters at once. So we're not necessarily, I think for folks that have been involved with the process so far on any of the steering committees, there's kind of some areas where there's segmented out kind of like within each neighborhood cluster, some smaller waves where kind of wave like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, if you will, where once we get into some of the larger dollar amounts, that's where I think the recommendation and the need to keep it tight at first definitely comes into play. But the purpose of this is really kind of neighborhood cohesion, people working together. If you can find a team of people that wants to do it, then great.
So this would go live in the entire Tip Hill and the entire Salt Springs neighborhood target areas?
Barring any strong feelings that the board had otherwise.
And when the applications come in, who reviews them and says they're approved? They don't have to come back to the board for approval,
We
do
would,
they?
well, and so I think that that's kind of another piece of this, I guess, as the recommendation that I would put forward, unless the board feels strongly that they would like us to handle it differently, would be that as long as a particular project complies with the programmatic terms that are adopted, that we would be able to administratively approve those without coming back to the board for any additional approval. We can certainly provide kind of a monthly report out of here's number of applications received, here's what was approved. And then if there is any deviations that needs to be made, then we would bring those forward on kind of a case-by-case basis to say there's a situation where, to the point of, that someone is doing something that requires a contractor, they can't get it in within the 90-day period.
Yeah.
We would create a process for that, but we would also document that that was where we were deviating.
I think that sounds great.
Board members are dropping like flies here. I have failed in effectively managing this meeting, but obviously these are important conversations, so I don't want to rush it. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that.
I'm okay with, Mayor, us moving, long as I can put those, waivers in, far as the, adding on a couple of things for scope, changing the numbers of people, and not having anyone have to go, far as the money wise, it has to be.
Is the, just one level.
Yeah,
So
one,
one level up to 2,500.
yeah,
Minimum of 3 neighbors, down from 5. Other preferred projects include driveways. You could probably count this in front yard landscaping, but I would include walkways, kind of front walks, maybe ADA-related improvements.
we add repair to fence removal, fence
Sure.
yeah.
Do we,
You agree? You say yes. Yes.
So moved.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
yes, sure. Well, Rashida, you want to make that motion? This,
Yeah.
the eligibility, the block challenge grant program with your amendments
Yes,
in form of a motion to approve.
so move.
I will second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
The only thing that I have a little anxiety about is the reimbursement, because not everybody's going to have $5,000, but I'm confident that you can solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And bring back an agreement with Karen.
There's some programs that we reimburse now, so
Yeah.
I mean, they're gonna, like, we won't reimburse on, Suffolk Home. We don't reimburse on labor.
Cool.
Right,
Sounds
If we're
good.
paying a contract, you know.
right.
Yeah.
And I also would like to say that I know as you go through this, there's gonna be things that we're gonna learn, right? We're gonna have to tweak, so this is our government's rules, and throughout the process, we might have to, take some stuff or add some on, so. that's
Good.
all part of it.
Michelle, were there other updates you wanted to share?
For time, so we can save it for another meeting. I would just say, within the packet, it breaks out, I know we had some conversation about some, like a 10-year budget projection, kind of 10-year activity targets that CZB had put together that, because of the way that they had kind of evolved over time, the numbers did not totally line up between the older versions and the newer versions. So we have kind of fully consolidated those to what we kind of anticipate is kind of our working averages. Again, is subject to change based on factors both in our control and outside of our control, project costs, things that we may choose to the point of kind of continued experimentation and adjustments that we might make. But it's at least kind of a target amount of, we think roughly this is the distribution of what things are likely to cost in each neighborhood, and provides a little bit of a framework to measure against, so.
I have one other question before we break out. I didn't ask it, but on the scope of service, is there anything with like drainage pipes or anything? Because I know that neighborhood over there, because they sit on the hill, they have water issues. And those, are we considering none of those things if someone, got gutters or?
Yes, and I would say that for those, I think we would want to consider them kind of in conjunction with the larger home repair programs, understanding that that's where we start to get into kind of a cost that's quite a bit, is going to exceed $2,500 matching potentially. So, so I think that we would want to bucket that out there. But yes, absolutely, those are things that we would want to.
Using the grant program doesn't preclude them from using the bigger program,
Correct, but we do still need to finalize the terms for the bigger program, and I think that at this point, kind of where the working timeline that we're on is kind of get the block challenge program out the door for the fall, and then focus on kind of opening applications for the bigger stuff.
But we wouldn't
first
say
of the
no
year.
if somebody said, I gotta get gutters because it's messing up the paint or so. That would still be fit into it, right?
I think that, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay. Just,
Cool.
yep, thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, board members. Thank you, community members. Thank you, staff.